Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How you all feeling tonight? Okay lah, actually it's the afternoon. Feels like I'm taking after him, right? It's like a comedy show. Okay, quick introduction. My name is George. I am the head for Singapore, Malaysia as well. I have a lot of friends and studios from around the world who are here as well. Thank you all for coming. I see some of you, right? And yes, we are coming into Singapore. In case you're wondering, of course, the metaverse is everywhere, but actually setting up an operations to really serve the market locally and regionally, we are coming into the Singapore. And I hope that today, what I share with you will give you a bit of an idea as to how you can actually participate in the sandbox, right? Because I think that's the question we get asked a lot. I was here a week ago. I was bombarded with meetings. I half the time did not know who I was meeting because there's so much interest and we're trying to cater to as much as possible. So hopefully this session gives you an idea about what you can do together with us, okay? Now, let me just start off by saying, sharing a term, a quote by Neil Gaiman, right, which is "make good art." Now, I particularly like this because this is very telling during this very difficult time where everyone has gone through COVID, people's been trying to do business, and you know, in good times or bad, we want to make good art, right? And art is not just limited to just creativity. A lot of people think it's just about drawing, singing, dancing, but that's not what it is about. Innovation is a form of good art, right? Because what is art but an effort for us to communicate with an audience, to touch their hearts, to inspire them to move forward. And I think this spirit is very important in Singapore, right? Especially as I see the way business has gone. Well, I know a lot of people still feel it's kind of tough in Singapore, right? But I think that people are making the best of it. It's a very strong show of strength, and that is also why Singapore is known to be one of the world's best places for tech innovation, all right? And that's why it's important for us to be here, because Singapore is a great launch pad for the rest of Southeast Asia. So what does this mean? It also means that even if you aren't a Singapore-based business, but you have a regional office here, but you want to do something for the rest of the market, you can come to us, we can connect with you for our friends in the other markets. We are steadily growing in Southeast Asia as one of the more important places for us to be in right now in terms of growth. So, what is our plan in Singapore? Naturally, we want Singapore to be a part of the open metaverse in a big way, in a significant way. We want to put Singapore on the map, right? And this map is big. If you have any idea, if you want to know how big this map is, just try our Alpha Season 3 and play it. The total size there that we have introduced, 90 over experiences, is less than 1% the total size of the whole map, right? It's huge. So, but we want Singapore to have a big presence, right? And within a year, I hope to at least get 50 to 100 partnerships, which if you consider the amount of partnerships we existingly have, that makes up a big percentage, just to show you the ambition we have in Singapore, right? So we really invite you to come and consider speaking to us. Now, naturally, the way people monetize or benefit for their businesses is through the development of NFTs. It can be avatars, entities, ownership of land, rental of land. There's many aspects to it. Now, this may be daunting for some people, but it does create new jobs. A lot of people can't seem to understand how all those things translates to new jobs. You can be in the form of creation, you can be playing the game, and even helping people to discover aspects of it, like a tour guide, for example. These are all sounds strange to many people, but the virtual world is becoming more relevant as we bridge between the traditional Web 2 space and the Web 3 space. And that's why we have so many brands in the sandbox, because that's a very good way for us to connect the real world with the digital world. So there's so many new jobs that is happening, but all requires and is built around the creation of voxels, NFTs, and that's why recently, just on the 20th, a shout out to my friends who are here, Small Bliss team with Aventis, we launched the Sandbox Academy. Now we have built the tools. The tools are actually not complicated to use. They are no code. Now why no code? If you can give a 14-year-old without code or even sometimes, even with code, they could build something very interesting. Many of us here in the room may struggle to learn how to use these tools, but your kids, the next generation, is going to be like fish to water. Okay? But for those who want to have something a bit more formal, structured learning, to see how they can have a roadmap, not just in terms of mastery, but at the same time, in terms of having opportunity. That's what we hope to achieve with the Academy. So this is the first Academy, and it's been launched right here in Singapore. All right? So what we also hope is that for those of you who are here, who are in the business, whether you're in Web 2 or you're in Web 3, and you have an innovative, collaborative idea that you would like to discuss with us, please do knock on my door. Okay, so this is one of the first things that we want to talk about. It's really about educating people to allow them to make much better quality assets that they can sell. These are for individuals, by the way. You don't have to be a studio. You can be an individual. You join the academy, you learn, and then you can actually be a part of the metaverse if you feel like you need guidance, right? But without it, you still can make something out of it as well. Now, we have, like Johan has touched on, we have talked a lot about the creator community, UGC's user-generated content. Now, this to us is not a small aspect of the metaverse. This is probably the most important aspect of the metaverse. Why? Very simply, it's because if you have a metaverse and it has no content, there's nobody inside, why would you be there? Correct? The thing is, in traditional games, all the content is created by a particular company. And there's limitations to that. There's lack of variety. There's lack of culture, or local, kind of a local culture into it, right? You'll be playing a game that's made all the way in the West, and there'll be no local Singaporean aspects to it whatsoever, because that's where they're made, right? But in a metaverse where the landowner or the creator is fully in charge and in control of the kind of content they make, that's where you get a richness. That's where you can simulate a real world. That's where you can go to one land and feel like you're in Singapore and go to another land and feel like you're in Paris, right? So user-generated content is a very big aspect, and we have a game maker fund. So for those of you who are aspiring to build your own game studio, you don't have a game platform, or you don't want to spend years to have a go-to-market just to build your own game, we do encourage you to apply for our Game Maker Fund to build in the sandbox, right? We have given out to more than 50 studios who have applied for the Game Maker Fund, and if you have ever any questions regarding the application of the Game Maker Fund, please do let us know. And many of our studios are actually recipients of the Game Maker Fund, and they've grown from like maybe a 2 to 4 person studio to maybe like 20 or even 40, I believe, one of the studios have grown to, just because they have been investing and building in the sandbox with our support. Okay, and because of that, we really believe that this is where most of the revenues goes back to you. This is one of the opportunities for aspiring game makers to apply. Now, what if you're not a studio? What if you're an individual who just loves making art? That's where we also have the Creator Fund, where we give opportunities for people who qualify to actually build assets for some of the biggest brands in the world, right? I'll give you an example. One of our creators in Malaysia, he is someone who just approached me. He says, I'm an engineer. I have no background in art, but I really love voxels. And he just used our Vox Edit, and he went for it, and he applied for the Creator Fund. And he's one of the very few individual creators out of Malaysia. Just recently in Alpha Season 3, he came to me and he told me, I'm so proud of myself. I'm like, why? Because you know the BAYC land, the ship, he was the one who made it. That was his high point, right? The point I'm trying to share with you is that whenever new companies come into the metaverse, they don't actually have any expertise to build the metaverse, right? They don't have a designer who does voxels, for example. So they need to work with us or our studios or even our creators to build them. So 2 messages there. 1, the creation of new jobs as more and more people go into the metaverse, especially not only for you, but your kids. 2, it gives even the most remote individual, maybe in an island somewhere in Indonesia and Philippines, very separated from the main cities, an opportunity to work with some of the biggest brands. And that's what we have with the Creator Fund. And of course, individuals will be encouraged to apply when applications are open as well. And we have been supporting, we've been giving out, we have more than 100 studios working with us. Not all of them are from the game maker, and definitely more than 30,000 creators, individuals from anywhere around the world. And they can all choose to apply with us if they want, and we can be that central anchor for you. Now, lastly, I just want to touch upon on companies or IPs, brands, cultures. Now, why is this important? Naturally, especially for here, we want to bring some local flavor, right? We want to have that connection with people. Because when people go into the metaverse, it's an empty space. They see a brand that they are familiar with, that would be their first interaction, you know? And it's more comfortable when you're interacting with something you're familiar with. And we have many brands who have already entered the metaverse with us, and many communities, because of the NFT collections, we make them interoperable, allows them to come into it, 2D into 3D to experience the metaverse. Now, we want to engage with as many partnerships, quality partnerships as possible, as I mentioned. And we want to actually work with local-based and regionally based companies to go into the metaverse and to create something like what Johan mentioned just now, a Singapore-verse. Now, this is still in the works. This is not fully out, so I encourage you to have a conversation with me when you want to leverage on that. But let me give you a picture about what happens when you become a partner of the Sandbox in our metaverse, right? So this is not like just buying land. You actually need to come and have a conversation with us, and then we'll go through a form of agreement. And once that agreement is done, we then go into this approach of how you can engage with your customers. Now, like we mentioned just now in many of the speeches before, we always talk about it's not just about NFTs to make money. I think that's the perception that is in the minds of most people. Sure, it does make money, but it's also a powerful way to engage with your brand's followers and also to create brand stickiness as well. So if you can imagine, if someone were to be running around with your avatar, it's no different than someone running around with a t-shirt with your company brand on it, right? That's why we give them out anyway. So these metaverse experiences allows us to do that. But in general, most companies go through a similar formula. First, after we've had that discussion, agreement, we have determined the strategy for you in the metaverse that you want to try and or proceed on. Then we go into 3 separate phases. Now, using Snoop Dogg as an example, Snoop Dogg was one of the earlier ones who has come into the metaverse. And firstly, we create that whole story, and we create the land, the what's that called, the presence. And also at that time, we had a land sale. So we sold land, which connected people with the NFTs. Like people actually bought the land around his land, and he got some Snoop Dogg cars, right? So that's one example. So we create that narrative, and then we actually proceed with a land sale that sells the land around your land, and also to create presence and attention for your land. That's why it happens, right? Why sell the land around you is to create presence for your land and for people to know that you are there. After that, it's really about through collectibles to engage them. It can be in many forms. Of course, Snoop Dogg, for the fans who wants to emote as Snoop Dogg, they get the Snoop Dogg avatar. Some people want the experience, the metaverse concert, so they buy the passes. So we create that entire plan, and then after that we do the sales of the NFTs. And then lastly, like Johan mentioned, we finalize with a form of an event. Now the event can be a hybrid, which means it's not just an online, but it's also online and offline. And I think later on, one of our studio partners will share an example of that. So it culminates to the end, which is an event. Now, all this, besides the engagement with your community, is also about creating lots of brand value in an innovative way that's different, that's relevant, especially to the new generation. So, and we've built a lot of tools to make the engagement on your for your games more interesting and create further opportunities for monetization. We do have the play-to-earn season rewards mechanism. Now, for those of you who are gamers, you should be very familiar. This is how most AAA games actually monetize, by launching season passes. Now, this is not just about showing you that Sandbox can do it, but this is also an ability for development of games in future. You want to have longevity, you want to have stickiness. This is a problem that a lot of games that have been built for a long time, how do they last for the next 20 years, right? And how do they keep monetizing for the next 20 years? So we are constantly building more tools in order for you to build better engagement and also to monetize those engagements. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, just wanted to highlight the few points. And I hope that for those of you who are looking to build an experience, to connect with your audience, or even if you're an individual who wants to be relevant for the next 10, 20 years, because this is definitely a long journey. A lot of people think and ask us, hey, Metaverse is going to die tomorrow, or crypto market is going to die tomorrow. The answer is definitely no, because we are at the beginning. Bear markets is when people build. And I've been here since the last cycle, and I've been answering the question, will crypto die, since 2017, okay? And the fact is that if you study charts, the chart looks like that, but it's still long-term uptrending because the market is still growing, okay? Number two, the technology, the ability for you to own real digital assets with the use of NFTs. It's a very exciting prospect for any business, right? And any form of engagement, shared ownership. All these are new dimensions to your business that even we are experimenting with new ideas. So the point I want to make is there are no crazy ideas because everything in the sandbox is innovation, right? That's why the name Sandbox, because it's a sandbox for you to experiment new and innovative ways to engage with your consumers, both domestically, regionally, and globally. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this is my contact. If you're interested, let's make good art together. Thank you very much.